feeling good, can I tell?
What's up, everybody? My name is Brother Ray. We'd like to welcome everyone to the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club for our Black History Month kickoff. For the audience that came out, give yourself a great big hand. For the Zoom audience, give yourself a great big hand. We meet here every other Wednesday. Rob, bring the camera over to the... In honor of William Mackey Jr., Louis Ray Rivera, Brother Assad, Minister Khaled, El-Haj Malik Al-Shabazz, Amos Wilson, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Attorney Maddox, Miss Leola, Professor George Simmons, Ivan Van Sertima, Brother Harold, and all the historians who gave up fame and fortune, burned the midnight oil to bring history to the people. They could have went the other way. Chancellor Williams, all these individuals. Miss Leola Maddox, who worked all the way in Teaneck, New Jersey. And she had an old car. And she would drive that old car to the United African Movement and have her dinner in the UAM because she believed in bringing people together for the live lecture so you could talk. So we salute Miss Leola and all the individuals. Brother Youssef made his transition. Runoko Rashidi. Yes. Crimson Brown. So these people gave up. And they studied hard. Yes. Brother Raji, bring the camera over to the Amos collection. These books are to help Brother Sababu, an African World Info System, to continue the great work of African World Info System with Amos and Sababu. We have Amos's classic, Blueprint for Black Power. Sababu's latest in honor of Amos, The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat toward a Reclamation of the African Mind. Amos's classic, Black on Black Violence. The Psychodynamics of Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination. And you hear every big city mayor, regular people, scholars, presidents, when they initiate crime bills. We're killing each other. Why can't we stop? Ain't nobody ever read Amos Wilson. The title of the book is The Psychodynamics of Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination. Amos Wilson. African-centered consciousness versus the New World Order. The developmental psychology of the black child. Awakening the natural genius of black children. The falsification of African consciousness. Issues of manhood in black and white. And then we have S.K. Daliana. Distorted truths, the bastardization of African cosmology. And in honor of Louis Ray Rivera, when Professor Mackey left us too soon, Brother Louis Ray came, and he would come down here with the late Brother Assad, Calvin, and all of us that wanted to continue Professor Mackey's legacy with lectures. And Louis Ray would come down here, and he would talk for hours. And he lived 2 blocks away on Jefferson Avenue. And we would clean up And Louis Ray would talk for another hour and a half while we walking home. So we never want to forget Louis Ray Rivera and his classic Jazz in Jail. These people left us too soon. I have some books you could get to read, purchase them on Amazon or wherever you get them. You hear a lot about medical marijuana. And this is the first time I've seen people smoke weed. And usually in the old days, you smoked a joint, you started laughing, and you started looking for a tuna fish sandwich. Or a big giant hero. And you're sitting on the corner just laughing at everything. You see what they smoking now? I ain't seen a person laugh yet. And I sure don't see them eating no food. And guess whose picture is sitting right here? Old greasy George Soros, the man behind the medical marijuana, and this is Dope Incorporated, the British Opium War against the world. So it's the reason why all this stuff is happening. In honor of Dr. Randy Short, Slavery Mastery, we have this book in honor of Dr. Short. And he was fierce on Darren Muhammad's show this week. I'm listening to an old Mackey's tape. City College and the Jewish poor. It used to be free. Mackey did a good job. And I got this book, and it lays it out. It is commonly believed that Jews in America rose from rags to riches because of their passion for education, particularly in relation to the City College of New York. A mystical has been created, a never land has been imagined. Sherry Groylich writes, in which docile Jews living in
keep reading.
Safe slums gradually, respectfully, obediently lapped up the gifts of Anglo-Saxon culture to the administration, admiration of love of their teachers. In this never land, democratic and free institution, open gladly and bountifully to receive the hopes and passions of their eager entrance. But this is not what happened. The myth of the easy marriage of Jewish values and American opportunities, according to Groylich, ignores the variety of Jewish culture and the drama of the vast social and political processes that made Jewish society globally possible. At the time of the first wave of Eastern European Jewish immigrants to the United States in 1881, education was not a ladder to success. Higher education was designed to give cultural polish to men of independent means. College was firmly in the grip of theologians.
Powerful.
And as Truss always says, copyright the State of University, New Jersey. Thank you, Professor Mackey. Again, in honor of Louis Ray Rivera and Brother Truss, Max L. Demon, Jews, God, and History. And you can sure see where they made up a lot of stuff. So I want to thank Louis Ray and Brother Truss for letting me know about this book. Things that make you go, In my personal opinion, the only one that believed in the great people of Georgia, Cynthia McKinney, when China sneezes from the coronavirus lockdown to the global political economic crisis. Our girl Cynthia McKinney and them folks in Atlanta and Georgia on orders from white folks got rid of her. And they smile and they doing the same thing now. In honor of Big Harold, the transfer agreement, the untold story of the secret pact between the Third Reich and Jewish Palestine. And they could not stand Edwin Black when he wrote this book. In honor of Dr. Ben, Black man of the Nile, and his family, old Doc Ben didn't have not too many computers, but he had the pictures here on the greatness of Kemet. So we want to salute Dr. Ben. I want to thank Dr. Mackey again, Evelyn Kale, a modern woman look at the Orthodox and Hasidim Judaism, the hole in the street, in the sheet. And this is a book with something else in here what Dr. Mackey brought up.
Hold on. Turn it around. Does anybody know what the title of that book means?
A hole in the sheet.
The hole in the street.
Sheet.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sheet.
Oh, okay.
The bumbling beds where they gotta cut a hole to do the.
Okay.
Right.
Mrs. Evelyn
That's right.
K.
Most people, they look at that, they don't understand what Keisha and Reg is talking about is that Orthodox Jews, in order to have sexual intercourse, they put a sheet.
Yeah, so this book is published by Len Strout, 120 Enterprise Avenue, Secaucus, Molson Book Company. The Hole in the Sheet is a provocative and outspoken view of Orthodox and Hasidim Judaism from a modern woman's perspective. Evelyn Kay grew up in an Orthodox Jewish community. She experienced the discrimination against little girls which began the day they are born. She learned that even in the 20th century, women are deprived of the same opportunities as men. In the Orthodox Jewish world, women live as they did hundreds of years ago when the biblical rules was developed. Orthodoxy and Hasidim follow the same precepts. The Hasidim movement, which began in the 1750s, has kept the clothes and customs of Eastern Europe at that time, while followers of modern Orthodox Judaism prefer to blend into today's world. Those differences aside, both groups still treat women with the disdain of a male-dominated society. Like women within fundamentalist Protestant sects, we are firmly tied to the kitchen, sink, and those in conservative Catholic denominations who are denied the right to extraceptive information. Extreme Orthodox and Hasidim women still have little education and a strictly limited freedom. Thank you, Professor Mack.
Yes, indeed.
Rajiv, bring the camera in. This is Without Sanctuary. And everywhere you turn around, you hear about reparations. And I heard the governor just signed something for the Jewish community to get some kind of reparations again. Well, in this book, they have the pictorial of the hangings, where they crowded around. And Billie Holiday used to talk about strange fruit. Brother fried to the cross, crispy. So all these pictures zoom in, and every goddamn time you turn around, it's another study. We got to do a study. They must have never got this book. So that's the next con game to get black people to vote Democrat. They ain't giving you a goddamn dime. Capitalism on a ventilator. The impact of COVID-19 in China and the US. In honor of Al Kamati, Irritated Genie, his classic Jews Are the Problem. World War II, COVID-19, and media censorship. We want to thank Io. His book is fierce. The Truth About COVID-19, Dr. Joseph McCullough and Ronald Cummins. exposing the Great Reset, lockdowns, and vaccine passport. Our good friend and comrade out of Georgia, Dr. Scott Whitaker, Medicine, MEDISIN, the causes and solution to diseases and malnutrition and the medical sins that are killing the world. Presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy, who probably will get my vote if I don't vote for the Don. The real Anthony Fauci, vax versus unvax. Let the science speak. These are a bunch of doctors in this book, and this is Dr. Brian Hooker, PhD. The studies the CDC refused to do. This book is based on over 100 studies in the peer-reviewed literature that consider vaccinated versus unvaccinated populations. Each study is analyzed and health differences among infants, children, and adults who have been vaccinated and those who have not are presented in and put in context. Readers will find information on 1. The infant child vaccination schedule, thimerosal in vaccines, live virus vaccines, the human papillomatosis HPV vaccine, vaccination and Gulf War illness, influenza flu vaccines, hepatitis B, vaccination, COVID-19 vaccine, and vaccines during pregnancy. Given the massive push to vaccinate the entire globe, this book is timely and necessary for individuals to make informed choices for themselves and families. You can get this book. The Wuhan cover-up and terrifying bioweapons arm race, Robert Kennedy. And then we're going to come down with the Coupe de Ville. Zoom into this, Rajiv, please. This brother name is Edward Dow. And this also was forwarded by presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. Unknown causes, the epidemic of sudden death in 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, and going to go into 2026. Edward Dow was an analyst with BlackRock, according to his documentary. And BlackRock wanted to find out why, before the scamdemic, all these individuals was paying their premium and living good, and they was collecting large amounts of money for insurance premiums. And when the pandemic started, all of a sudden, people started dropping, and they wanted to know why. And this book covers everybody that collapsed. All the kids, the graphs, the pictures of people dying and collapsing, 32 years old, students. Edward Dow, 28 years old, dropping dead. 18 years old, 27 years old, dying in his sleep. A person, a young man, dies of a collapse while running. One was on the hockey field. So you can get this on Amazon, Edward Dow, you want to salute him. So these books can be purchased through Amazon, and you go looking and you can find them. Okay. Information to the global community, Thursdays, the hottest show on the East Coast, Thorough Black Talk with Keisha, Tad, Ashe, Brother Blacksmith, and Sister Marcia. That comes on YouTube and Facebook. 8 o'clock every Thursday. Our Philadelphia connection with Sister Empress Chi and the Million Women's March, Blog Talk Radio, that comes on 10:30. And also it's on Zoom now. That's Blog Talk Radio with Sister Empress Chi. Sankofa Revolutionary Radio comes on every Monday at 10 o'clock. Ayo Kamati and Brother Anthony Muhammad, 95.1 FM out of Birmingham, Alabama. And that comes on Monday at 10 o'clock, Sankofa Revolutionary Radio. Our Baltimore connection with Brother Darren Muhammad, State of the City, comes on TuneIn Radio and comes on State of the City, Baltimore, and Facebook Live. That's Brother Darren Muhammad. 1590 AM Glen Burnie. Dr. Lean, Your Immunity Project comes on every Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Just Google Dr. Lean, Your Immunity Project, and Dr. Lean is coming up with some good information. The Simultap organization with Dr. James McIntosh and Richard Dean Theodore and Miss Betty Dobson. That comes on Wednesday on Minefield, 99.5 WBAI. I missed it today, sorry Dr. Mack, but I know it was on the money. If out of Asbury Park, out of Newark, our African Echoes family has a study group that comes on every Friday at 8 o'clock. And the moderator of that group is Brother Trust Graham, Danny, Brother True, and the gang out of Newark. That study group comes on Fridays at 8 o'clock. And whoever's on the Zoom, you put the information in the chat, and people could write it down there, and they give you a double header. Not only do they give you a Friday study group, they come and give you and bang you again with a Saturday, the Know Thyself study group out of Asbury Park. Brother True and the gang out of Asbury Park. Trust Graham is the moderator of that study group, and they're doing Chancellor Williams' The Destruction of Black Civilization. So we have these groups for people to join and study. Now, without further ado, you can view all the lectures of the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club on YouTube. Just type in BK William Mackey Jr. History Club. And you go through the lectures and you can investigate and search and see what you want to do. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to kick off our Black History Month presentation as we do every year. We give the founder of African Echoes and a good friend of the Mackey's group. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a great big hand to our good friend and comrade, Brother Trust Graham.
Thank you, Brother Graham. Could some of you let me get some of that.
What you want?
Some water. I want to pour a libation.
You need a cup?
No, I gotta use this. Before I get started, I was trying to wait till Dr. Lewis came back. But what I wanted to do was, I want to open up, appropriately, especially on the beginning of African History Month. And one of the things that we have to be, how can I say, cognitive of, and that is our relationship to our ancestors. That's very important. Very, very important. But I guess we're gonna get started.
Hey, Ray. Speak up a little bit, Trust.
Okay.
Ray. The audio ain't that, you can't hear not a word.
Can you hear now?
A little better. Hey, Ray, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good, Trust.
Okay. All right. You may as well get started.
You gotta talk like Ray.
You mean scream at the top of your lungs for no reason?
Okay. First of all, before we get started, I first want to let everybody know, one, my name is Trust, and I am the president of African Echoes, which is a particular satellite organization of a very prominent organization that started right here in the city of New York, and that was First World Alliance, that took place at 145th Street and Convent Avenue up in Harlem, right around the corner from City College. And we want to make sure that everybody knows that that is the organization from which we have relationships with William Mackey and Brother Robert Ray Ray and Sister Keisha and Brother Abdul and Brother Mike Graves and all the folks here in the Republic of Brooklyn, the People's Republic of Brooklyn. But before we get started, it's always important to open up appropriately by one. I would like to ask the oldest member in the audience to give me the opportunity to speak.
He says it's okay, you can speak.
Dr. Lewis, you may get it?
No, anybody here is here? Do I have the
Yes.
no?
Yes.
Thank you.
She's saying yes.
Thank you, Dorothy. The reason that I do that is because this plays reverence, respect, and honor to those individuals that came before us. And it's important that we always make sure that there is a chain of hierarchy in our community in regard to how we look at individuals that we hold high in esteem in our culture. They didn't just come here and they didn't just acquire those positions by haphazard. They came there by. And in order for us to function as a people, we need our ancestors, with us, to be a reinforcement to fortify who we are. Me, I always have my ancestors with me. They hold my back. See?
Oh, there you go, right on it.
Hey, I don't play. So the object is to make sure that we do that. So what I will do by opening up, I'll open up by pouring a libation, and that libation is first to those individuals that have recently passed or made their transition. As Ray Ray had already indicated, some of the names of some of the very prominent individuals who we want to acknowledge. So as I go through, some of these names, after those few names that I name, then we want to name as many, people of personal and historical caliber that you can recognize of value that you want to acknowledge. Because the process is the calling of the names of our ancestors helps them to live. And this is what we do. In respect, reverence, and honor to all those individuals whose shoulders that we stand on and came before us, to those individuals who pioneered the ground to make it happen for us to live and exist and to contribute to this meaningful world, we want to make sure that we give love, respect, and honor to those individuals. This is just for the ancestors as a collective. I want to first say I want to give a libation to Sister Viola Plummer.
Ashe.
I want to give a libation to Brother Clemson Brown.
Ashe.
I want to give a libation to Brother Youssef.
Ashe.
I want to give a libation to Brother Renuka Rashidi.
Ashe.
And of all, I want to give a libation to one of the greatest individuals that helped make African consciousness a part of our lifestyle, and that's to Robert Nesta Marley. Now I want people to call out those individuals that are personal to yourselves as those individuals who make it possible for us to be here. So my first individual that I'm gonna call out is Professor George Simmons. Come on now. Elijah Muhammad. Ashe.
Marcus Garvey.
Marcus Garvey. Ashe.
Maddie Fuller,
Ashe.
Clayton Smith,
Dr. Ben. Ashe.
Malcolm X.
Malcolm X. Ashe.
Attorney Automatics.
That's right. Automatics, without a doubt, 100%. Ashe. And that's
Amos Wilson.
Amos Wilson, 100%.
What
Ashe.
about Kenneth Pointer?
Kenneth Pointer. Ashe. Eleanor Atkins, my grandmother. Ashe. Teddy, oh, Lewis, my man.
Dr. William Augustus Jones.
Oh, William Augustus Jones, William Jones, Ella Baker. Ella Baker, 100%. Come on now. Come
Emmett
on.
Till.
Who?
Emmett Till.
Emmett Till, 100%. Come on now.
Dr. King.
Dr. King. El Haj Malik Shabazz. Fannie Lou.
Dr. Clark.
Dr. Clark.
Betty Shabazz.
Yes, Betty Shabazz.
Shay.
And the names that we call out are giving life to those individuals in regard to they being active members of our aims, goals, and objectives as a people.
And Martin Delaney.
Martin Delaney, we can't forget, if we forget Martin Delaney, we're going to have to throw in Marcus Garvey. If we throw in Marcus Garvey, we're going to have to throw in William Blyton. If we don't go up Blyton, we're going to have to, let me stop. But again, you are right. The issue is, there's not enough libations and water for all of the contributions that go back to immemorial. So we want to thank and praise all of those individuals that paid the price, the ultimate price, for us to be here and us to have the opportunity to celebrate this particular month in honor and homage of our people and ancestors. Ashe, ashe, ashe out, ashe out. Okay. Now, the subject matter. I don't know whether y'all knew what the subject matter or the topic was going to be.
No.
African history and the importance of the study groups. I've been beating this dead horse for quite a while now, and I more than likely will be beating it to the end of my days. But one of the things that I found out about the whole process of our culture and history is the clarity of it, whether we really know what we're talking about. And one of the things that, you know, is very important is, one, that we pay homage to those individuals, but we learn the lessons from their experiences. Because African history, Black history, African culture is not about romanticism. I'm not saying that romanticism don't play a part, because you want to have a romantic relationship with your culture, for sure. But that's not the only component in which we try to engage our people based on their contributions and the lessons that we learn. Second is that we gotta stop with the milquetoast history. We gotta stop it. We gotta stop assuming that every hero was some perfect person that had no flaws, that had no problems. You know, it really nerves me a great deal of time that we have now taken on some of the components of religion in our community in regard to, and when I say religion, I'm talking about the dogmatism of being able to look at something without a sense of clarity and depth. So when we talk about our history, most of us talk about it from a surface point of view. And that's understandable because a lot of us didn't have a training or an enthusiastic love for the process. I just happen to have that, and you know, it was one of my pet peeves. But one of the things that I did find out is that the importance of a study group became so essential. So essential. Now, I'm gonna ask y'all a question. And I want you to give me your basic answer. Dr. Lewis, what do you think a study group is? What is it? A study group.
It's to get people together and the teacher, the master, like, is to show, not only get the information, but to show us how to study and what to study.
The issue here is very important, what Dr. Lewis says. And mind you, this is one of our esteemed elements. Matter of fact, the first time I came in contact, with Dr. Lewis was by way of my mentor, the person that actually taught me what I know, and that's Professor George E. Simmons, who was the right-hand man to Dr. Ben, who also was Professor Lewis's the right-hand man to Dr. Ben too. So at that time, if I remember correctly, Dr. Lewis was involved in a group of people from Vanuatu. Was it Vanuatu? Vanuatu, right. And at that time, if I remember, if I'm correct, Dr. Lewis, they had an embassy in Harlem. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, mind you, 99% of all embassies are downtown. I want y'all to know that. It ain't like that. You have the option of setting up where you want to. That's, the opportunity. But Vanuatu was first that I ever known, unless you know something else, Dr. Lewis, that ever had an embassy, that any group ever had an embassy in Harlem at that particular time. And I was introduced to those group of people as well as to Professor Lewis by way of Dr. Ben. And Dr. Ben, as well as Dr. Clark, and every one of these individuals that Ray named, especially Dr. Mackey and Amos Wilson and, Alton Maddox, these individuals had a direct impact in my life. So what I'm going to talk about pretty much is my involvement in the process of the necessity of a study group, but also how they came to be. And I'm talking about not just the modern day ones, the ones that go back to the early 20s. Because a lot of times we assume that the things that we do today is something new, like we just developed it. When in reality, they are just rehashed concepts that come from a yesterday that a lot of us don't even know of or are not familiar with. So one of the things that I first found out was that we used to go to 145th Street and Convent Avenue at First World Alliance every Saturday. It was like religion to us,
Yes, sir.
And back then, there was no videos. They didn't exist yet. And at that time, it was the era of cassettes. The era of cassettes. So you would go to the church, and it would be an average church sanctuary setup with an altar and everything. And where the area where the altar was, where the podium was, where the lecturers would speak, there were banisters that went on both sides. And they would be full of cassette tapes, all the way across on both sides. And we would go there every Saturday because this was almost like, it was like, well, it was a renaissance. It was a rebirth taking place in Harlem at that time, but it was in a way where that the thirst was monumental. It was like 1965. I swear it was just that kind of impact. But the significance about that time period was most of these individuals that you see here were young men. They were all young men. No gray hair. A lot of them had hair on the top of their heads. And,
Amen.
But they were powerful movers, shakers in the community. And one of the things they did was they began to provide for us an outlet in order to give us access to information that readily we wasn't getting on a regularly basis. Now that's including whether you went to an institution or not. When I mean institution, an academic institution for education, whether it's secondary school, primary school, whether it's college or graduate, you wasn't getting it. And these were the individuals where we had the opportunity. This ain't even real wood, but knock on wood, that I had the opportunity to actually sit, like we see people now in books, but we had the opportunity, like Dr. Lewis and us, to sit at the feet of these people and actually listen to them on a daily basis. With that, most of us now, we see them on videotapes. You know, we listening to audio tapes. But we had the opportunity to engage and interact with these individuals on a regular basis. And when these forums began to come into play, and First World wasn't the only one, but it literally started a plethora of different ones that began to develop, like the Slave Theater, you know, that also came out in Brooklyn. And again, we developed one in Newark, New Jersey, African Echoes, in 1983. Again, as a homage to all of this new information that we was getting. But between 1985 and 1990, the material was coming so fast and so deep, it was just incredible. I mean, books and information, because at the time, one of the things that also gave me access to individuals and information was, at the time, about 1980, 81, I lost my job. And Professor Simmons said, well, you know, you don't need to be working in there anymore. I'm going to see about a friend of mine and see if I can get you a job in New York. So I said, okay. So one day he said, come with me, we're going to go set up a study group in Brooklyn. So I said, well, Professor, he said, don't worry about it, just come with me. So I said, okay. So we go to Brooklyn, we go to 604 Flatbush Avenue, on the corner of Flatbush and Rutland Road. And he introduced me to this guy by the name of Fritz Lewis. And I was like, okay. And he was telling me, because at the time, you know, I'm just an enthusiastic individual who's like a groupie for Professor Simmons. You know what I'm saying? I carry your bags, you know, whatever it takes. And he said, here's a guy, you say you need a guy, here's a guy, he gonna show you, he gonna help you out. So I said, look, I don't care, I just want a job, but if it came down to working around books, I'm your guy, right? And one of the things that relationship created was it created a bond of relationship, a brotherhood, and then it created a level of insight in regard to information that I never would have assumed of. Never, not even a little bit. Because in the book business, it's different than academic, because books are on a level where they come in so fast and change, and then, you know, new things is out the door. I mean, old things is out the door and new things is coming in. So I got used to understanding the mechanics and the discipline of books as well as the business itself. So I got to be very familiar with books, authors, and time periods, just because of working in the store. And then what happened is, being with Professor Simmons, what had happened was, how I got with Professor Simmons wasn't by way only of First World, because First World was a lecture, where you went to hear a lecture. You went, sat down, and they told you a lecture, you went home and, you know, you paid your audio back, and, you know, you was full. It was like church almost. And then there was a group of us that was like, no, that ain't enough. We need to really know this stuff, really, like, the lecture ain't enough. You really need to know, because a lot of times in lectures, lecturers, and I myself do it, you'll say things and make statements about things without clarity. You're not giving people information in an in-depth level because you're restricted to time. So you got to deal within a certain boundaries. So you give a certain amount of information out, and then what you try to do is you try to shore that up with either evidence or facts or so forth and so on. But what I began to realize is that after we went to a lot of the lectures and we would discuss with people, you know, some folks just didn't have a clue of what we was just discussing. It's like you in church, the pastor done said something or read a passage in the Bible and they asking you what happened. You don't have a clue. All you know is what he regurgitated. That's it. Not what goes around it, what led up to it, what's behind it. You know, and what am I supposed to be getting out of this?
Right.
You see, there's a difference between knowing that the Moors were black versus what am I getting out of this? That's a difference. That's a big difference.
Context.
That's right, context. So what happened is that we began to realize that we needed somebody who was going to guide us along, somebody that was going to help us, you know, through this process. Now, originally when we first started the project, the idea, Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark was going to help us. But at the time, Dr. Ben was back and forth to Africa so much that, you know, what they did was they started having the study group at Convent on the annex side over there at the, what's the name? And then it got to be so big, they had to move it from there to City College. And then after a while, Brother X and them said, well, let Professor Scobie and Dr. Jeffries and all of them, they'll handle that there, and then we will take the rest of the half of the group, and then they'll deal with the individuals in Jersey. So Professor Simmons elected to come with us to set up a group in Jersey. Now, mind you, we talk about a study group, not a lecture. We already had a lecture series. And Professor Simmons came when we had the first class. You know, I was all enthusiastic. I had to get my books and stuff, you know, sit down and, you know, you thinking like lecture, but his position was no. So he asked one question. He said, how many people in here can read? Now everybody was grown. So he said, how many people can read? And everybody started laughing. Professor Simmons was not, he didn't flinch. He said, how many people can read? He said, I didn't ask you how comical it was. I'm asking you, can you read? Can you read? And everybody raised their hand. And he said, before you leave the room tonight, you will find out one thing. You cannot read. Bruh, before that night was over, he opened up the book. He read one sentence. One sentence. We was on a sentence for the whole night. For the whole night, just a sentence. Now and the thing was, what he did with the sentence was so deep that when I left, I kept saying to myself, man, all he talked about was one sentence. I can't believe that. And that shit, it was just like I didn't get enough of it. I could not get enough of it. And he explained why, how, when, where, everything. The first thing he asked was, one, do you understand? But every time you read something, he would say, what is he saying? See, most of us read things and we read them with the intents that we already understand, that we have some knowledge of what we read, and we know we don't. We jump over words that we know we don't know. But we think we can understand the context of the material by jumping over it. And Professor Simmons, he was like, no, that ain't gonna work. So the first thing he did was he began to break down the whole concept of what it meant to consume information, which was a very detailed context. Because one of the things that we began to realize is we didn't understand how we was consuming something. We assumed that it was just pick it up and read it. Pick it up and read it. So I remember he asked this question. I asked my students this question now. I said, how many of y'all ever read a dictionary? Anybody? How many of y'all know how to use a dictionary? No, I didn't ask you, look, let me say it clearly. I'm not asking you how to look up words. That's not what I'm asking you. I said, this is what I'm asking you. How do you use a dictionary? And I'm saying is this, that the dictionary is a book. It's based on a certain fundamentals. If you read the first 3 pages in there, it's going to tell you how to use that book. All dictionaries aren't the same. They're based on a certain structural framework pertaining to how they are looking at information. In the first part of the book, that's what it does. It outlines its approach on how it's going to address the subject matter. But most of us, we ain't even read that because we think we know what we're doing. Because, let me ask y'all a question. How many of y'all went to school and learned how to use a dictionary? 1.
Properly.
This is different. This is why one of the things that you've seen in the Malcolm X movie that is a part of the Malcolm X legacy is his fascination with words and his fascination with the dictionary. He didn't look up words. What did he do? Anybody know what he did?
The origin?
No. He read the whole frickin' book.
That's right.
From beginning to end. He became a wordsmith based on the very fundamentals of how to use words in their proper context. So if you're using and you're trying to communicate and you're using a word and it's out of context, most people who at least have some idea on what the word is about, the first thing they're gonna keep listening and think first, okay, it's a honest mistake. But if he start hearing these things done over and over again, then he's going to realize that something ain't right. Right. So what that did for me was it made me understand that there was more to information than just listening and getting a thrill out of the information. Versus really understanding the context of the information and learning from what the experience was. Because we can look at our heroes and talk about their accomplishments, but most of the lessons that are learned from history are about shortcomings. They ain't about accomplishments. People don't, they talk about the accomplishments, but the real work and lessons are learned from the shortcomings. So that's what they provided. So these individuals, Professor Mathie, Amos Wilson, Alton Maddox, Professor George Simmons, these were individuals who were meticulous in their ability to consume information. Other individuals like Jake Carruthers and Renuka Rashidi and Asa Hilliard, these were not teachers. They were teachers of teachers. That means that they knew the mechanics of what it meant in regard to how to disseminate information. I'm not using the word education. I'm using the word how to disseminate information. Education is self-done only. Let me say this again. You can only educate yourself. Nobody can educate you. You can get a training, and you can only get a training if you allow it to take place. Don't assume that when you go to an institution and they give you a certificate that means that you're educated. It exactly means just what it did. That you got a training and they gave you a certificate. That's what it means. How many people go into a doctor's office and you ever seen the doctor's office license and certificate on the wall? Any of you ever seen that? Does it tell you what grade, what level he passed at?
No.
Did it say whether he was a C student or a D student?
No.
Then you don't know whether he bought that shit off the street or not.
Craigslist.
Look, he got a white coat on with a doctor's stethoscope around his neck with a license on it. And many of us right here in New York see doctors that open up practice and they ain't never went to school, went no doctor nowhere. And he working on people and everything.
Doc, is that true?
Yes. We all know it.
That's not that.
So if a individual can pose as a doctor and get away with it, could you imagine what a teacher can do? You know how many people posing as teachers? Listen, this is Trust. Trust telling you that more than half of every teacher in this city is posing as a teacher. Let me say that again. More than half of every teacher in this city, not in just this city, whether it's in Newark, New Jersey, or Camden, whether it's in, Cincinnati or Chicago, it ain't no different. Nobody in their freaking right mind is going to teach or educate another individual to take their power. You stupid. That's not what real people do.
Right.
If you ever read history, history is not something that is given, power is not something that is given to somebody. That's not how it works. But in the process, what that did for me was it sparked me with this thirst that I still never quenched in regard to wanting to know and understand. I didn't just want to know. I wanted to know and understand. I really wanted to know how it worked. What was the mechanics of it? What made it really, really function? So if we talked about us being Africans, what did that mean in the total context and in the specifics? How are we going to look at this in its current, its past, and in its future context? And then looking at history culturally, economically, spiritually, we don't take time to look at it like that. To us, it's just a romantic relationship. And it happens a certain time in the year. So when we look at and we deal with these individuals, we're not really trying to learn the lessons. This book here is one of the most powerful books that ever became published. Because it's an eyewitness account of some events that were so horrific,
That's right.
that was so devastating, that was so severe to who we were as a people, that it is that I make sure everybody that ever been to my house, I have a picture on my roof. When you walk in, you're going to see it. That it means every black person that walk in my house, that's a reminder.
So,
See, what's significant about this book is I know James Allen. James Allen is the guy that published this book. He's the owner. I met James Allen before this book even came out. James Allen was a thrift guy. He used to go around thrift shops, buying thrift shit, this, that, and the other. And what he did was he went to this one thrift place and this guy had a postcard of a black guy being lynched. And he looked at it and he said he couldn't believe it. He said the guy, and he said, as a matter of fact, it wasn't one, it was two of them, like side by side. So he said he looked at it and he said, are these for sale? He said, sure. He said, both of them? He said, yeah, I got plenty more. He was like, oh, shit. So he said, not trying to be excited, but where did you get that? He said, hey man, these were sent all over the place. I got them from an old postal master. So he talks about the story about how he would go, and when he found out that these photographs were being sent through the postal service, he went to different places to see whether he could find more, and he found plenty of them. He said he would find posters with Africans being lynched, and they would cut off hair or cut off, and they would paste it to the postcard and send it to the mail. And on the postcard it would say, Willie, look, we lynched a nigga today.
With his hair on the postcard.
With the hair on the postcard. See, we don't realize that when we talk about the very nature of the horrific aspects of slavery, that's why they don't want you to talk about it. See, the reason these white folks don't want slavery to be talked about it, because if it was talked about it in the real, organic way in which those events took place, bruh, it would make the freaking Holocaust look like a freaking... listen, let me stop.
Yeah, a picnic.
The reason I'm saying that, and this is no disrespect to Calamity, the Holocaust was a catastrophic event, but it wasn't for 400 years. I just want to say that. It wasn't for 400 years. And I want y'all to understand is that don't get it twisted, it ain't stopped.
I know that's right.
Y'all think y'all marched your way into parity? No. The slave system now is as big as it was then. If not, it's bigger, you know. The slave system is bigger now. The only difference is we call it prison.
That's right.
Michelle Alexander did a fantastic job. Black woman went in and showed you the relationships with the prison industrial complex and its relationship to slavery. It ain't nothing by put another name. But what Professor Mackey and, Professor Amos Wilson and them began to do was they began to take a concerted effort of taking it a little further than just the lectures. Now, there were other individuals that did other things, but these individuals did something uniquely different. I mean, uniquely different. See, we talk about Marcus Garvey. We talk about it. We talk about how great he was with his concept of Back to Africa movement. But see this man here, he'll tell you, nobody I know on this planet Earth here in America took more black people to Africa than Dr. Ben. Do you know somebody? No. Nobody. Nobody took more people to Africa than Dr. Yosef Ben Yekinen. Nobody. Never do they talk on the radios about that. They don't ever talk about that. We talk about Marcus Garvey. He ain't never went to Africa. He ain't never went to Africa. And they never took nobody to Africa. And this is not no disrespect to one of the greatest mobilizers and organizers and galvanizers of black people in America, Marcus Messiah Garvey. Nobody. But let's not put him in a position where he wasn't. Talk about him based on what his real contributions were. So when I say somebody that had a Back to Africa movement, a real his name Dr. Yosef Ben Yekinen. And not only did he take you, he literally took you on an he never called it, I'm going to take you on a tour. His always was an educational tour evaluating the history and culture of black people, of African people. Because Dr. Clark would always say, we ain't black people, we Africans. He would always say that. He would say it because his position is, we can't reduce ourselves to this myopic, narrow-minded perspective of looking at ourselves only based through color, but looking at ourselves based through culture, through language, through all of the aspects and the components that make us a people. That's what he did. These are the things that they set in place. Dr. Mackey and Dr. Clark were two of the greatest individuals I ever met. Why? Because those two individuals told me, both of them told me the same thing. You'll never understand African history until you read white people history.
They say.
What is this?
With a book at.
Right there, Trust. What are you talking about, Dr. Bennett's book?
These two books. This is the work of Dr. Mackey. Why do I say that? Because Dr. Mackey was a ferocious reader of European history, a ferocious. He could tell you stuff about Europeans in a way that it'll make you scratch your goddamn head and you say, I just could not believe that happened.
Scratch more than your head.
He was the first person that tell me about why white people in Europe wore top hats.
For the dookie, they were thrown out the window.
Come on. Reagan, you took the punchline. But that is correct. They wore top hats because they used, what did they call them? What's the name? I can't even think off the top of my head. But they would urinate and defecate in pots. And to get rid of the what's that?
Chamber pot.
Chamber pots, that's what they call them. Thank you, my dear. Chamber pots. And those chamber pots, when they would get full, they were thrown out the window. Now, if you was walking down the street, see, we don't understand. We think that women walking on the inside was because the man was trying to protect her.
Right. That's right.
No, hell no. He was, as Ray said, he was trying to protect her from the dookie that was being thrown out the window.
They were dodging shit.
That's what they was doing. Something that we black people in America know about a lot. Dodging shit.
Umbrella ain't had nothing about the rain.
But again, this is information and ideas that people like Dr. Mackey and them would present to us. And then what he would say is that he would say, the first thing he would do, that like him and Dr. Mackey, what they would do is they would tell you stuff first and then get you all along. And then he'd be like, well, y'all think that Professor Simmons would say, well, see, if you don't believe me, you believe God. God said. So he said, let me go get the white man. Because if the white man said, I know that y'all believe he God, and if he said it, it's true. So they would go get the books. Like Evelyn Kay. Look at the white ladies. Y'all see her? Now, if I came to you and said that some Jews, the only way they had intercourse was with a white sheet in between them with a hole in it. That's how they have sex. I didn't say that. The hole in the sheet.
There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Wow.
You see what I'm saying? Now, mind you, I'm just telling you about information based on being able to have one important aspect, and that's fortification. Professor Simmons, Dr. Mackey, Amos Wilson, and especially Alton Maddox, and that is you never go to battle without evidence.
That's right.
Never go to battle without evidence. Never go to battle without half-truths. We don't do that. If you half know something, trust says you don't know it. That's right. The issue is that you have to have a complete understanding. Let me say this again. Trust didn't say you had to have a complete knowledge. Trust said you had to have a complete understanding. I'm going to ask my homeboy here. This is my homeboy.
You don't know nothing.
Yeah, this is my homeboy. Abdul, is knowledge power? Nope. Whew. You hear what he just said? He said it with conviction. Do you believe what he said?
I'm not touching this.
She said, I like that. She said, I ain't messing with that with a 10-foot pole. How many believe what he said is true? That knowledge ain't power? Keisha? Reg? Let me ask y'all this question. How many people have heard that knowledge is power? Come on now. Right. But all of us real thinkers know that knowledge is not power. Knowledge applied is powerful. Right. Right. Now, the issue is, this is knowledge. It's knowledge. But if nobody ever reads this book, it's just ink and paper. For real. That's right. In other words, what Abdul just said is most important about knowledge. Knowledge is something that has potential. It has potential. That means if you don't take it and use it in a particular way, it ain't getting you nothing. And what these individuals began to realize and began to know, because when you go to lectures, and how I found out about all of this from working in a bookstore. So we would go to the lectures, and I remember at that time, Professor Simmons, he was using Stolen Legacy. Like right now, we, in our study group on Friday nights, we using this book, The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat. If you never buy another book ever in life, buy this book. This book right here is on a whole nother level. But anyway, the issue here is that most of us don't understand the significance of what it means to actually observe something, investigate something, and then come to a rational, logical, pragmatic conclusion. That's called a scientific approach. You have a scientific approach. And the scientific approach is that you don't look at information based on what you think, or what sounds good, or what's in fashion, or, you know, what's going around. That's not how it works. So what happens is that whether you know it or not, in history, there's a lot of things like folklore, legend, and tradition that camouflage as history.
Yes.
That is not history. Let me say this. Abraham, y'all heard about him, the guy in the Bible? Mm-hmm. That is a folklore.
That's right.
No, it's not. It's true.
That is not history. Anybody know why it's not history? Say it again.
I said it didn't really happen.
That's correct. And what did you say?
That's the job just to back it up.
Both of y'all are correct. In other words, we have no evidence. Now, that's not to negate the fact that just because you don't have evidence means that it didn't happen. No, we can say that, of course. The issue is just that, is that because we don't have evidence, that's what it is. It's speculative. So, yet when you share an information, you have to make sure that you couch it in a certain way in order to make sure that the information that you shared is shared properly, even if it's limited in the information in which it's given. It's like saying that Cleopatra was black. Y'all heard that before, right? Mm-hmm. Cleopatra is black. Which one? He asked a real big question. Which one? So obviously he must know that there's more than one what? Cleopatra. Right. Now, if that is the case, then obviously we have to designate which one, and then who was she based on her pedigree. That means who her father and her mother was, and who their parents was, or, you know, all of that kind of stuff. You know, I was listening to Charles Finch the other day, and he was talking about, he made a claim in regard to Cleopatra that I have never seen. Anybody ever know where Cleopatra was born? Anybody?
Iraq.
She said Iraq. No.
Mesopotamia.
No.
No, she was born in Egypt.
No, she would.
She was born in Egypt.
She's not from Egypt. She knows the culture of Egypt, but she's not from Egypt.
She is from Egypt. She was born in Egypt. What makes her different is her parents are Macedonians.
Right.
Right.
But
That
Now-
don't mean they're white.
Say that again?
That don't mean they're white.
That's not the issue of whether they're white. The issue is who was running the show in those areas at the time. And the influence of why those individuals ended up in a position of authority and power. One thing we know about individuals who sat on the throne. In 332, when Alexander, the son of Philip of Macedonia, let me just say that, his name is Alexander, son of Philip of Macedonia. His name is not Alexander the Great. His name is not Alexander the Greek. Let me explain. If you read history, you will know that there was a fierce battle between the Macedonians and the Greeks.
Yeah.
And in this case, we know who won out.
Macedonians don't like being called Greek.
Right. Very much so. They hate it. But be it as it may, in this case, what Brother Mike is talking about has merit, and that is that what made Cleopatra a reverence for indigenous Egyptians was that from 332 all the way down to 30 BC, from 332 all the way down to 30 BC, that's about 300 years. That means that the Greeks and those individuals that came after those individuals, meaning Alexander, the first individual who sat on the throne, and then every individual after him, all of those individuals who were foreigners who sat on the throne in ancient Egypt for 300 years, not one of those individuals spoke Egyptian language. Did you know that? Not one. Not one of them engaged in the culture. What made Cleopatra so unique was she knew the language, and she engaged. As a matter of fact, she made the Egyptian religion hers. And their position was, well, she got Jews. Now, anybody here that ever been to Africa, if you ever been to Africa, the first thing you know and you find out real fast is when a person knows that you can speak some of their language,
They love you.
bruh, you in like Flint.
Yeah.
I'm telling you. What it means is that now you are a part of me. That's how they're looking at it. You see? So in this case, you have this situation that jumps off. When you talk about how we see ourselves, it's based on a certain standard that we look and how we begin to define ourselves. And one of the things that I began to realize is that we need to go back and really begin to reevaluate this. In other words, we have to really begin to look at history differently, not just for what individuals did in regard to their accomplishments. You know, I always ask the question, you know, if you can name somebody that did good things, there gotta be some bad things they did, some.
All white people ain't bad.
You notice I ain't saying nothing.
I'm just saying.
Hey, the issue is what is white. But what I'm trying to get to here is to get us to understand the significance of what it meant for us to really do in-depth research. So when we went through the process of looking at Cleopatra and then began to understand the significance of what pedigree and all of that did. Let me ask y'all a question. Is your mother black? You. Yes. Yes.
Yes,
Is your father black?
yes.
Right. And if your mother and your father took you to Mexico, would you still be black?
Yes.
All that don't change.
Okay. Just wanted to be clear. The reason I'm asking that question is the same question that I ask all individuals. And that is that if your mama is Macedonian and your daddy is Macedonian, wherever you are, you're what?
Macedonia.
Oh, okay. I just want to be clear.
I
just wanna be clear.
And the other one with
Right.
biscuits.
There you go. And she right. You know, what she said is because dogs that have puppies in ovens, they're not, when the dog has puppies in the oven, they're not called puppies, they're called biscuits. Did you know that?
If you cook them right, they go.
Sop them with some gravy. But the reason we're saying this is to give us a clarity on how we are looking at the information. So what Professor Simmons did was he literally taught us how to read. And it was, a mind-blowing experience because it gave me an understanding about information that I just never knew that actually existed. I just never knew it. And it made me look at information differently, just completely differently. And then one of the things was, he had this thing about word. He was always like, where did you get that from? He said, where did the word come from? He said, where did you get it from? So I would tell him the definition. He said, no, I don't want the definition. Give me the etymology of the word. Tell me the etymology. Right. See, even in etymology, I was talking with a guy, he said, well, the etymology is the oldest, he said, it's the oldest root of the word, right? And I said, no, it's not. Etymology is the oldest usage of a term in a certain language. That's all it is.
At a certain period.
Well, no, what it means is that that certain period has to do with what? Writing. If there's no writing, then there's no record keeping in regard to that term coming from somewhere or originating in your own indigenous population.
That's why I said Cleopatra's not Egyptian. She's Macedonian.
That's right. She's Macedonian by biology.
Right. That's
But
why-
again, it's the same thing that the issue that we have here in America. There's very few Africans that gonna look at us and say, they're gonna ask you what language you speak. They're gonna say, well, what tribe you from? And they're gonna say, you ain't African. He'll tell you, I'm telling you.
They'll say right now you're going to fool.
That's right. The reason that is because they have a certain standard, a certain yardstick that they measure what they believe an African is. And we here in America, we have our definition of what African is. Most of us associate African primarily by color.
Right. So Trump,
Africans don't do that. They can't. Why? Because they all black.
So Trust, you saying etymology cannot be the complete.
No, it's only up until a certain time, as Red said. What they're saying is that when we got used to this word, we knew it to be this. Right. But what we're saying is that, let me ask y'all what came first? Oral tradition or written history?
oral.
And what is older? Oral tradition or written history? So you're telling me that people were speaking shit for a long time, and then all of a sudden we wrote it down, and that's the beginning of the word. No, that's not how it works.
That's what I thought.
Right. So this is what I'm saying about being able to understand the mechanics of how we're using information and understand the benefits from those mechanics. And this is what Professor Simmons and William Mackey and Alton Maddox, these were individuals who were the best at investigating information. They're the best, not a little bit, the best.
No doubt, no doubt.
And then the second is, it's not just in finding it out, it's actually interpreting the material. That is no easy task. To see material that you might not be familiar with and then break that material down word by word, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, and really, really get a clarity of what is trying to be said. And this was at the base of what it meant to be a study group. In other words, a study group is not a book party. It's not a book club. You get books and we read books. No. If I said to you, read this book. If I said to you, read this book. But if I said to you, study this book, is study and reading the same thing?
No.
Of course not. So most of us don't understand that there is a process in regard to how we actually really study material. How many people went to church and I asked them, do you read the Bible? He said, yes. Do you read the whole Bible? He said, yes. I said, from cover to cover? He said, yes. I said, wow, that's deep. So I asked him this question. If God exists, where does he live at? If God exists, where does he live at?
Don't fall for it.
In heaven.
Ah, you fall for it, you do.
Or maybe hell.
He said heaven or maybe hell.
Maybe told you don't want to fall for it.
But how many people think God live in heaven? How many people think God live in hell? Well, what's the way? Y'all don't think God live at all? Like, what's up?
What about in your mind?
It's your concept.
God within you.
Yeah, your concept.
Dr. Lewis said, what about in your mind?
Or Detroit.
Now, my only problem with that is I don't have no problem with what Professor Lewis said. Only problem I have is it's not in the Bible.
It's not.
Now, all I want to know is, anybody ever read the Bible? Anybody? Couple. All I want to know is one line in the Bible. Just one line. I want to know Genesis 1, line 1, verse 1.
Oh, God.
That's in
In the beginning. In the beginning.
No, well, it's a whole line. What does it say? He created what? Say that again. He created the heavens and the earth. If he created them, he could have been living there.
When come back in the front, Russ.
Right.
He can't be living there and he created it.
But what if it was having 2.0 that he created? He was in living.
See, you've been watching TV too much. The reason I'm saying that, this is just a logical context of looking at the very nature of what we're talking about, investigating the very nature of textual material in a context based on the time in which it was written. The issue is that when we read material, it has a context. So if you read material that is written in the 1st century, don't expect to get 10th century results.
Yes.
You get what I'm saying?
Because it changes at different times.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that you can't expect your kind of thinking to be transported back to the 1st century. See, we lived at a time where there was a thing called slavery. The 1st century, they wasn't dealing with that. That wasn't their prerogative at the time. Did it exist? Of course. Not on the level that we're talking about. But one of the things that is important is to assume that our perception of how we see the world through the goggles and experiences that we see is the same experiences that we can literally transport back to the 1st century. So they say that Jesus was being persecuted for his color? Come on. In other words, Septimius Severus was one of the major emperors of Rome. He's a black man from Africa. But the issue issue is that are we looking at him as a black man? Are we looking at him as an African? Or a Roman? Now, if you read his writings, he died as a Roman.
Yeah.
His two sons, Caracalla and Geta, both of them. Don't you know one killed the other? Don't you know right now, most of the Italians don't even know that they riding around with a black joker's name on their freaking truck. Y'all ever seen Geta Sanitation? You know, it's a big, what's the name? Pickup. Big in the city.
Come down
Geta.
Come down Fulton Street every morning.
That's right.
Three trucks.
They don't even know who Geta is. Caracalla, same. Black man. Now, the issue is we basing this based on what evidence we have. But see, there's a lot of times we take history and we leap forward and make it what we want it to be. I had a guy tell me, he said, well, the first Americans were Africans. So I'm scratching my head. I'm like, shit. I study anthropology. I study molecular biology. I study cultural history. I ain't never heard that shit. I ain't never heard that one. So I asked him, I said, like, where you get that? He said, you didn't know that the first people in the Americas were black people? I said, how do you know that? So he said that, listen, no, he thought that he was really smooth on me. He said, well, the DNA says that he was so-and-so and so-and-so. I started laughing like a chest. He was like, what's the matter? You don't believe in science? I said, that's the problem. I do. I said, but it just shows me that you don't understand it. Now, Dr. Lewis, let me ask you a question. Does molecular biology, genetic sequence codes tell you how a person looks? Can it tell you how a person looks?
Well, the best way that I can tell you, based upon my understanding about DNA, when these scientific agencies sequence DNA, you got about 6 institutions that all tell you different numbers of DNA. And then I said, when O.J. Simpson was on trial, and they had his DNA, say, this proves that it was O.J. Simpson. And the people said, yeah, 3,000 other people in New Jersey have identical DNA and RNA.
See, the thing here is this, that DNA is sequence codes, as Professor tells you. The only difference is that it only tells you about genetic material. In other words, it tells you about molecules and nucleotides. That's what it tells you. It tells you that your nucleotides and your molecules are similar to this person's nucleotides and molecules. It didn't say that that's who you look like.
Right.
Why? Let me just explain to you how genetics work. Let's say that your nucleotides and your genetic sequence code say that they're familiar with this woman who's a Nigerian in the Yoruba tribe in Southwest Africa. Southwest Nigeria. And the first thing you say, you look at it and say, oh, I'm Nigerian. Now, the reality is that that's not how science works in regard to genetic material being transmitted. As you do know, in science, whenever there is a transmission of genetic code, there's a thing called mutations. And mutations are something that happen automatically. They're not something that's they're part of the process of reproduction. Most of the time, mutations have very little change or do nothing. And then there are certain mutations that have a major change in the nucleotide. That means you have 4 major molecules, A, G, T, and C. Guanine, cytosine, let me see, guanine, cytosine, thymine, and whatever. But anyway, those are the 4 nucleotides. And they make up what it called the double helix that actually are the stair steps that makes up, that makes up what are called the basic elements of who you are as an individual.
Right.
That's what they do. Now, the only problem is that the young lady that we talked about in West Nigeria, by the time Africans moved up and decided to move outside of Africa, one thing we know for sure is those genetic sequence codes go through a metamorphic change. Because the change of people moving through migration also changes the molecular makeup as well as the biological makeup of the individual. So the same person that left Africa that you said settled China was not the same person. It was a person that was thousands of years later. And not only thousands of years, also environmentally and metaphorically, that individual went through a change. So all of the races that we so-called see around us, all these different colors and textures and shades, that's based on migration and genetics. Migration and genetics. So obviously it would have been impossible for the person that left there to be like the person that arrived there. If you left Africa and you arrived in China, completely different people.
But why is the mitochondria of a woman from Africa sent it brought it tell you?
Yeah, but we're talking, when you talk, and I'll explain that to you. The issue is that the genetic sequence code was made up, the concept of this whole study was done by 2 different schools of thought. You had Rebecca Cann, you had Mark Stone King, you had, what's his name? Alan C. Wilson. They worked at the University of Berkeley in California, and they only dealt with mitochondrial DNA polymorphisms. That means they only looked at the origin of human beings based biologically through a woman. Then you had the University of Stanford. You had Luca Cavelli-Sparks. You had, what's his name? Spencer Wells, who wrote the book and made the big TV series and everything. Right. They used the study of molecular biology through Y chromosomes, which is using a male as their primary base source and using that as tracking humans all the way back.
Journey of man.
Right. So you had 2 different schools of thought in regard to how we were going to approach this subject matter. It was not an issue of better or worse, just different. Just different in regard to schools of thought. But the only difference was Luca Cavelli, he originally didn't start out using genetic material. He started out using blood grouping. And he looked at albumin and all of that as being his base. So he looked at comparing blood groups between human beings to determine similarities or differences. And then he got into the whole issue of Y chromosomes. What was significant about that is that he began to show in these studies how they determined the migration of human people throughout the world. That means that we originated in one place and we moved throughout the world. Now, there's no map for that. There's no map we have for Africans got up and moved here, moved there, moved. But what we do have is a map, but it's not a map that we're familiar with. It's a genetic map. And one thing that map does is it records everything that takes place. So every major interaction that human beings had with each other over those tens, hundreds, millions of years, they were all recorded. They were recorded on your placentas. So every time you had a baby, somebody took a mark and said, you had another one? Had another one? That's how they did it. So what they did was they began to find out that every mutation that ever happened is still on the placentas of women. And what they found out is that the oldest woman would have the oldest mutations and they would have the oldest people in the world. and they found out that the oldest woman came from South Africa 250,000 years ago. They started scratching their head like, damn.
What the?
This changed the whole concept of what we talk about.
Changed a lot of lives.
Well, Professor, but listen to this. Dr. Lewis will tell you, back in the 80s, that's when Dr. Ben and them, they really got busy. That's when they came out with the major Time magazine expose of, that's right, Adam, Eve, right.
That's right.
They had Jerry curls too.
That's right.
That's right.
But they didn't have the shit.
No. So,
And they was white.
Say that again?
And they was white.
No, they wasn't.
Well, excuse me, they was Caucasian.
No, they wasn't.
We know they wasn't, but that
No. I'm talking about the magazine cover.
They say Eden is in Africa, but still we created jobs.
No, man. No, I'm saying is that the magazine cover was black people with jerry curls. And they were identifying those black people as the true origins of humanity. That was the case. But be it as it may, that was the start of the whole idea of Africans taking back, I mean literally taking back Africa. From that time on, I'm talking about the early 80s, that's what I call the African Renaissance. The real African Renaissance, started by Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, the Harlem community of doing what we began to do. So what these lectures began to develop, and they began to develop in a variety of different places, you know, whether they was in the Slave Theater or 148th Street at Convent Avenue at First World, or whether they were at John Brandt's at the Poetry Theater in Queens, or all over the place.
All over.
They was everywhere. They was just, you know, and then after a while, two things began to happen. One, people began to study and want to know more, and two, jokers wanted to go to Africa. It was like, from 1980 to 1990, I'm telling you, Doc took more people to Africa than anybody I know. Listen, one time when they had the big conference, was it 900 people they take? 900! Who takes 900 people to a damn tour? Who? Nobody! I'm telling you, we do not give them the praise that they so surely do. Because we don't understand the magnitude of what they actually did. We still romanticize it with Garvey. I love Garvey. I will never put him down. But when it come back to Africa, that's Doc Ben.
Okay, don't forget Detroit, 1930.
Oh,
somebody said that, you know, the original man is the black man. But go ahead.
Listen. You and I know what the story is. You know I know what the story is. So, you know, look, the issue is that but the issue is it's based on a certain concept and a certain school of thought and a certain line of thinking. And it's not an issue of bad, good, or it's just different. That's all. And we all at that time was looking for some way to offset the pejorative identity that was given to us and that we was now beginning to carve out, to literally create our own history and definition. And the guys that was extremely, you know, influential with that was guys like Garvey and Elijah Muhammad, guys like Noble Drew Ali, guys like Wilbur Blythe, guys like, these individuals were settling into a situation and knew that the individuals they were dealing with wasn't going to come and be their saviors. They knew this. Nat Turner wasn't waiting for white people to help him.
That's right.
He wasn't. See, and we have been spoon-fed a particular perspective about him, so that's why we don't talk about Nat the way we should. We don't. Nat should be held higher than Martin Luther King.
Right.
Y'all think I'm serious? I'm serious of a heart attack. I'm serious as a heart attack. In other words, and y'all don't understand that Nat Turner was as much a Bible-toting, that's nobody was like him.
God bless Nat Turner.
Right, the problem is we literally want to go with what the white boys say. Oh, that's a bad Negro there.
Would you put him higher than Jesus?
Yes.
First of all, you know how I feel about Jesus. Come on. Stop it.
Revolutionary.
You're right.
Yes.
Trust me, this is the point.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Dr. Cruz.
Just to make the point about what just said, Dr. Ben, he gave tours for years and years.
That's right.
The tours were so big that he had to take 5 or 6 of us to take the
That's
people
right.
over.
That's right.
And I believe, which is what Dr. Ben did for African people globally, was gave the Nile from Egypt all the way through Central Africa. You know, you come from Southern Africa through to Central Africa, Ethiopia, and Sudan, but you go Sudan, Egypt. He gave to the world. Like everybody said that the Egyptians were Arab. He gave to the world, to African people, and showed us by taking us. You took the pictures. You came back. So you had tens of thousands of people, especially African people.
That's right.
Doing lectures and showing pictures. Nobody in the world can deny now that anything along the Nile in all of the museums
That's right.
is African people. Everybody tried to claim it, but millions of us now have the proof. So to me, he gave the Nile firmly back to African people from Southern Africa all the way up, because everybody else is trying to claim it. You can't claim it anymore.
That's right.
Because we tens of thousands, he took hundreds of thousands of people. And what other thing?
No, go ahead, Doc.
To add to what he's saying, all of the individuals who are now taken to Egypt.
That's right.
So not only did Doc take you, you have people now multiplying it.
That's correct. 100%. As a matter of fact, I wanna reinforce what Professor Dr. Lewis said, and that is that he said that he gave us what Dr. Ben taught us. What he taught us, the first thing he taught us is there's no such a place called Egypt. He said there was no such a thing as the Egyptian civilization. He said it didn't exist. He said there was a Nile Valley civilization, but there wasn't an Egyptian civilization. Because by the time Egypt became Egypt, it had already been dead. In other words, the word Egypt, when it came into existence, and it became a part of that geographical Northeast Africa hemisphere, Egypt was already dead and gone. I mean, Kemet was already dead and gone in regard to their contribution.
Well, Egypt's a Greek word.
That's what I'm saying. When the Greeks got there, Egypt was done.
Right.
That we know of in regard to that particular contribution. So we're talking about, remember, 332.
Let me just make an additional point. As Doc teaches us and it shows, what you see Egypt, as they say, that's not zenith.
That's correct.
Before Egypt was those who you now, what preceded Egypt was those who you now see in Sudan, Ethiopia, Central Africa. And the way you see it is when you go to Egypt, you see the gods and goddesses, the small Twa, the same one you see as part of the pantheon of gods of Egypt. They existed in the pantheons of God in the century, you know, the Twa, the short side of Africa. That Twa that you see now appears all through Egypt, all through Sudan, all through the goddess. That connects. So he made us all scholars.
Wow.
Without a doubt, 100%. And what it meant was that we began to expand our insight and our understanding from the contemporary perspective of what Kemet, much less Africa, was, versus getting a clarity and an insight that went far beyond some of the text that these individuals was giving us and giving us more insight. There's a certain amount of material that we were exposed to that literally, as I would say, wet our whistle for research and study. There was no way that you could have listened to all these lectures, went to Egypt, had that experience and come back and do nothing.
No, but the irony was they made Cleopatra instead of Elizabeth Taylor was Cleopatra.
Yeah, but she was white.
I know. That's what I'm trying to keep saying, that those people were Caucasian.
No, I'm saying is that, listen to me, sweetheart.
You were Caucasian.
Listen to me.
That's how they keep claiming.
Listen, my dear, we just explained it. Cleopatra.
Well, I accept it.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not talking about them, I'm talking about me and you. I'm saying is that I'm telling, I'm just listen for a minute. I'm telling you, as I just explained to the group, that Cleopatra, the one that existed, Cleopatra VII, in ancient Egypt, was not a black woman. She was not. Her mother was Macedonian, and her father was Macedonian. She was born in Egypt, just like you, born here in America. Your father was black, your mother was black, but you ain't American, you really African in America. Right? Well, that's what she was. She was a Macedonian born in Egypt.
Let me make additional point, as he says, Egypt, that area you calling Egypt, she's at the time that, as he indicated, that foreigners, Macedonians conquered.
That's right.
And when they conquered, they put they had people carving.
That's right.
So you see it, but as he said, that has nothing to do with that thousands of years of antiquity.
That's right, that came before.
So it'd be wrong to say that it never was white people in Egypt.
Yeah, it's not that, but my dear, but what I'm saying is, I want you to understand this. Everybody that lived in that part of the world, everybody wasn't black. Everybody wasn't black. There were certain individuals that come from different areas. As a matter of fact, there's a term that Shakanta used to use for that area, where we see the Sinai, what they call the Levant, which goes all the way from where Israel is today, all the way to Syria. That's called the Levant in ancient history. And that whole area, there's a book written by Keith Seeley and George Steindorf. Keith Seeley and George Steindorf. It's called When Egypt Ruled the East. When Egypt Ruled the East. In this book, it gives you the demographics on the areas of influence that Egypt controlled. It was so huge and so far, you couldn't imagine. Because see, we don't look at Egypt the same way we look at Rome, or the same way we look at America. Egypt was an empire. It wasn't a nation state. Very different. Britain was an empire. Anybody, what's the difference between, let me say this again. Let me back it up. Which was an empire? Britain or England?
Britain.
Now, does anybody know the difference between Britain and England? What's the difference?
Britain's a collection of
Collection of states.
Right.
Or territories, whatever you want.
Yeah, but the issue is that you're talking about. I'm listening. The issue is that the term you want to use is confederated state. That means you got a confederates that come together under one umbrella. Versus England pre-existed Britain. I mean, there's England and then there's Britain. Which came first?
England.
Tricky on it, right?
Oh, the issue is that, see, this is why history is so important. And this is why I keep telling you about this man, Dr. Mackey. He would say, gotta read European history. All you gotta do is Google the English flag versus the Union Jack. The Union Jack flag is one flag. The flag of England is different. If you go Google the English flag, it's going to be a flag that's white all white with a red cross.
Yep.
That's England. The Union Jack is blue and red and black cross. And what that meant is that there was a confederated state that joined together. England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. 4. Britain. They came into existence at a certain time.
Great Britain.
Yeah, well,
You see, that's why you're a comedian.
It's the same thing like Soviet Union and
That's correct. Exact same thing. Exact same thing. Don't get yourself twisted. Russia and the Soviet Union, two different countries. Anybody know what's the difference between the Soviet Union and Russia? What's the difference?
one's a federation.
Meaning, I use the word, it's the E word.
Empire.
Empire. In other words, they are an empire. Whenever you talk about Russia as an empire, that means it had satellite countries outside of it. Poland, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, all of them were part of its sphere of influence.
That's the USSR, not Russia.
Well, it's the same thing that's happening in China today. You got Hong Kong, you got Taiwan, you got all of this. And the Chinese saying, shit, that's my stuff. We don't care what y'all say, it's my stuff. It's just a matter of time before I go over there and rough rod and get my stuff back. Now, if it came down to America, America would be saying the same thing.
It does every day.
Well, listen to this. October, the 1960s. Y'all remember that one? Y'all remember that?
No.
Jack Kennedy. Y'all remember that?
Cuba.
Y'all remember that? Right. In other words, we ain't saying you can't do what you want to do, but not in my neighborhood. You can do anything you want, but not in my neighborhood. That's what the Americans say. Not in my neighborhood. Putin said the same thing. Y'all can do anything you want, but not in my neighborhood. See, we going out there crying crocodile tears, but the reality is, during the Soviet Union, where was the Ukraine during the Soviet Union? Anybody know?
Where was it?
That's right. Where was it?
Right where it is now.
Yeah, but I'm talking about where its influence, its political and influence was.
Oh, the Soviet Union.
It was part of the Soviet Union, right? But Americans is telling you that no, they ain't part of the Soviet Union.
Trust. Can I just make another comment?
Yes, sir.
You know, the Africans, just one of the military people, conquered all the way into the Ganges River. There was a time when the Africans coming out of what you call Africa, they conquered all of that area. And so when you see Cleopatra and the Hyksos and stuff, as you learn your history, those are the times when we lost power and they were able to conquer it for a short period of time.
That's right.
The people used Cleopatra because there was a period of time where that group had come in and then they could say, you see, this lady's white.
That's right.
So the Egyptians are white.
right.
They're playing the game because they assume you do not know
That's right.
why they appear there.
Right, and then, you know, the funniest thing is to use leadership as the yardstick to determine what the full population is. That's just stupid. Because a lot of times you'll get individuals in regard to leadership that have nothing to do with the population. Like right now.
Like India.
Forget India, right here in America. How many jokers that's in political positions of influence are really representative of the rank and file of the population?
None.
You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying is that a lot of times we look at them as being reflected. You know, when in reality, we good? Okay.
Represent white hegemony.
Okay. So my major concern here is that we begin to adopt these particular practices of more intense investigation and more intense research and study. And what is trust talking about? Trust is talking about taking your time with the information. Stop trying to rush it. You know, stop trying to act like you want to be a speed reader. You know, it ain't like you're going to really learn something faster. It's not. Take your time in consuming information. And it's better to read a paragraph and understand it to read 2 pages and not know nothing.
That's true, that's true.
You see? But most of us, we don't take our time because we assume that we think we know what we have read, when in reality you haven't. And one of the first ways you find out whether you know what you're talking about is if you ask yourself questions. Don't let nobody else ask you questions. After you read the paragraph, you should say to yourself, what is he trying to say? What am I trying to get out of this? What is he trying to get me to see?
That's the key.
Right, and then second is every book has a theme. That means it has a particular trajectory in regard to what direction the theme is going in and how that individual is going to approach it. So in a book, 99% of the time in a book, what they will give you is, they will give you, hold on one second. They will give you an introduction. Now, if you don't get an introduction, they'll give you a preface. If they don't give you a preface, they'll give you a foreword. But in those particulars, they're trying to outline a particular summary of the direction in which that book is going to be going. And they're going to outline the summary in a particular short, concise way to give you an idea on what we're going to do. Now, what determines for me, this is trust, not anybody else, just me. What determines whether a book is a good book is not whether I like it or not. To me, a good book is a good book based on what the author's intent was and whether that author reached that goal. That means their intent to try to explain, define, or interpret something, and that they reached that. Whether I like what the conclusion or not is insignificant, but whether they did it, and then the particular style and approach that they did it in. Now, a lot of times, there's a lot of conclusions in books that, hey, I'm like, oh, hell no. But how they came to that conclusion and the methodology they used, they was on point. And I got to give them their props for that. But their conclusion, I wasn't feeling it. You see what I'm saying? And that's the idea of what real scholarship is, even in the academy. Because you want scrutiny from your own colleagues. People that are on your level that can talk to you the way that you talk to them, and they can look at the material in a very scrutinizing kind of way. That's why most scientists, when they come out with new discoveries, they literally write these white papers, and these papers are literally generated into the major science magazines so that they can be scrutinized. That's the idea. That's where they want to find out whether what they juice is really juice. Because a lot of times you make statements in science based on very limited amount of information or speculation. The problem is, do you have enough strength in order to maintain it? And in position, usually what happens is scientists that's been studying that subject on that side of the street, they're going to immediately come and support you. And then you're going to have jokers that look at that and say, oh, hell no, that ain't. And then they're going to come out and they're going to write papers against what you have just discovered. This is the necessary process in regard to going through the ringer of understanding what it means to come to real, logical, pragmatic, rational conclusions based on evidence and facts. And I always say evidence and facts is not the same thing.
Right.
I always say evidence is unchangeable. It is what it is.
Right.
So,
Versus facts are interpretation of evidence.
Written by the victors.
Sometimes.
yeah, but she made a good point about that. So it's going to be sometimes hard to determine if you don't have a background of the evidence or the facts are being skewed in favor of the person who want to give their perspective or influence you and believe in what they wrote. Like around the vaccine, you know, they got controversy, and they're all scientists. They come from the same schools, but you got a wide.
Yeah, but usually that's going to take place in a lot of material.
So who's lying?
Say that again?
Who's lying?
It's not an issue of lying. The issue is how we are couching the material. And when you're dealing with certain information, you know, scientists, real scientists don't get into absolutes. They just try not to because they know that it's a never-ending battle. In science, there's no absolutes. But people talk about science like they absolutes. You know, we talk about it as if though it's unchangeable, when in everything is changeable. So we assume that, like I said, when we see ourselves today, we assume the exact things we see today happened 1,000 years ago, 1,000,000 years ago, 5 million years ago. No, it's just completely different. And what we have to begin to understand is see how those evolutionary changes took place and begin to meticulously look at what those changes did and how they lived. Here's a good example. Somebody was asking me, this was a couple weeks ago, they wanted me to do a lecture on the 50 years of hip-hop. So I said, well, hip-hop is really not my cup of tea. I study history and I study things around hip-hop. If you ask me about particular individuals in the hip-hop community, I might be very shallow. But if you ask me like what hip-hop had on African culture, shit, I can go from beginning to end. It's not an issue. The problem is that it's how you are looking at the impact. So I was listening to KRS. He was on YouTube, and they had went to him and asked him to be a part of this 50-year anniversary of hip hop, and he said, "Oh hell no, I ain't no." And so and they asked him why. So he got on YouTube and explained it. He was cold, bro. And listen. The one thing I like about him is his position is it's about standards, it's about values, it's about principles. I don't care how you see that, but that's how I am. So he said that first of all, hip hop. He said the Emmys and all of that. He said that's about rap.
It's a difference.
He said hip hop is not rap. He said rap is a part of hip hop.
Exactly.
But hip hop ain't a part of rap. That's, you don't gotta twist it, see. And the issue is that hip hop is a culture. Let me say that again. Hip hop is a culture. It's very different than, say, rhythm and blues or disco. It is a culture. Bebop was a culture. It wasn't the music. But that's how we think of it. When we think about bebop, we think of a music. But most people that lived during the time bebop a lot of language we use today came from bebop. Right. Because like hip hop, bebop came with a language, it came with a dress, it came with a music, it came with a culture.
Charlie Parker, Miles Davis.
That's right. All of that. That laid the foundation. Now, there are certain elements that became a part of bebop that pre-existed bebop. There's no way you can play bebop without the blues. Impossible. Impossible. But the individuals that play the blues, most of them, they come from a different era. I'm talking about when blues started. So when we think about blues and Earl Father Hines or Robert Johnson or Muddy Waters or, you know, any of the big boys, those individuals knew that there would be no such a thing as bebop, hip hop, or jazz if it wasn't for the blues.
Absolutely. That's always been my argument.
Right. And then when you think about the blues, it's hard to think about the blues without thinking about gospel. How you gonna think about the blues and not think about gospel?
Facts.
Right?
Spirituals.
Yeah, but spirituals came before gospel.
Facts.
And then.
True.
No, yeah, spirituals first, then gospels. But then there was something before the spirituals.
The drum.
No.
Or the
No, come on. What came before spirituals? Come on, y'all.
Gregorian chants.
No, come on, stop. Give me something. No, come on. Give me something, y'all. Y'all should know.
Response.
No. Come on. Think. Remember, The issue about spirituals and gospel, it was a church, meaning an institution. Get it?
Work songs.
There it is.
Work songs.
Which are what?
Cornfield ditties.
But the issue, we're not talking about cornfield ditties. We're talking about the very nature of work songs that are different in retrospect pertaining to how we use them even during slavery time from which they came. Now, them songs, we don't
And
realize.
the basis of that was call and response.
Yeah, but the issue was that when we used them in Africa, they wasn't based on that. Remember, in Africa, there was no work that wasn't done without song. I don't know none.
Right.
There's nothing in Africa that's not done with either song or dance. Nothing.
Right. Or the tongue.
So the issue is that concept of using song as part of work is also an intricate aspect of how we got things done.
Right.
So when we came here, it wasn't no different. We seen this magnitude of this major challenge we had against us to survive. And we knew that shit, we was up against shit with a rock between us. So what was they gonna do? They gonna find some way to do it. And they did what they was already used to. Let's get through this. And that's where them work songs came. And then work songs became spirituals. And then spirituals became gospels. And then gospels became blues. And then blues became jazz. And jazz became all the way down to hip hop. We don't see the connection.
So where the instruments come?
Instruments also, all of the ones that we see today, those instruments are part of that. Oh, we're getting very close down. All of the instruments are part of that. Because when we see instruments today, don't you know, we think of a guitar today. But if you ever been to Africa and seen a kora,
What?
a kora, C-K-O-R-A.
The big guitar.
It's of 18 strings.
Heart, looks like a heart.
Looks like an upside down calabash with a heart strings. But that particular set in play, the very nature for how we look at the basis to what bluegrass and blues was. What's the most important instrument of that time? Anybody? Mm-mm.
What time?
Banjo. Banjo. There's no such thing as a banjo in the Western Hemisphere. It's an African developed instrument.
Let me just make a point that when you go to Egypt in the museum and when you go with Dr. Vitt and the rest, you're going to see all the instruments that you use today. What I'm learning from the past lectures, it sounds to me that these different branches of music I'm asking a question, does it come under the heading of culture? Culture being the way we do things, and the culture of all these music is just the African as we use, the way we use it in time? It's all one culture, the way we use things?
When you think about black people, music, and dance, there is no separation in anything.
No, it's just
And the thing is it's like sitting at home and watch. Anybody been at home and your mother's cooking and she just humming? In other words, that humming is part of the process. We don't understand that, what that is. You hear your grandmother do it, you know. All of this is part of the process because all of this literally was able to get through that task. And it was not just a task of, it was drudgery, it was complementary. It was something that was enhancing the process. Even though we a lot of times looked at it in a different context, it was actually that. But we get ready to close down. So before I end, I want to introduce y'all to, because it's impossible for me to leave here and not introduce you to some information. That's my cup of tea. Today, I'm going to introduce you to a new title just came out a couple weeks ago. And it's something that I think is an added feature right now to the experience in African history, much less, as Dr. Lewis said, the Nile Valley. And one of the reasons is because, you know, I've been involved in the study for going about 40 years now, or over 40-something years now. And the information was always given to us in a variety of formats. And Dr. Ben would give us a lot of material, but what he would do is, Dr. Ben was not always a chronological kind of individual. He would tell you the material in all kinds of ways and bits and pieces and stuff like that. And it's not an issue, it's just a different way of presenting information. But when it comes down to understanding certain kind of material, you want to see a particular chronological layout so that individuals can follow along certain kind of material. Now, in the African community, there has been a lot of African scholars that wrote on ancient Egypt or wrote on the Nile Valley. But most of them only wrote at specific times, like they would only write about the Nubian period or, you know, Egypt when it was in its glory days, or the Old Kingdom, the New Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, you know, so forth and so on. There was never a full-fledged chronological outline in regard to the history, from start to finish, from start to finish. And I don't know any scholar today, black, that has done that. A lot of white scholars do it. They've been done for many years. You know, Alan Gardner and you know, what's his name? Wilkerson and Wallace Budge and all of them, they write chronological history. Breasted, all of them write chronological history. And most of us, Shakanta, Teofilo, all of them, what they would do is they would always counteract what they wrote and criticize them, but they would never write out a complete chronological history of themselves. For once, it has been done.
Yeah,
Charles Finch just finished this book.
I did.
The Nile Valley Civilization, a 10,000 year history. 10,000. This is off the Richter scale. Let me just say this. The book is 550 pages. 550 pages.
What's the name of it again?
It's called Nile Valley Civilization, a 10,000 year history. To me, this title, he didn't name it that, but I'm naming it as, this is a tribute to Doc Ben. Because Doc Ben is the one that came up with this concept of Nile Valley civilization really being the Egyptian civilization. But second is that I love the subtitle, a 10,000 year history. We ain't talking about 3,200. We ain't talking about 4,000. We talking about 10,000 years. And homeboy got footnotes, bibliography, all of the stops, the whistles, the lights. It's all here.
It's time.
It is tight as a freaking, I'm telling you. You need to get this book. Listen, it's not a book. It's not something to read. It's an investment and it's something to study. Yes, ma'am. Say that again. No. This is from Atlanta, Georgia. This is Dr. Charles Finch. She's out of Atlanta.
So she always mentioned how she approached the book, looking at the prefix.
That's right. That's right. And what we're talking about is making sure that you use all of the basic, you know, bullet points for unraveling what this particular text is, but any text. The first thing you want to know about a text is the title. The next thing you want to know is the author. The next thing you want to know is what? What's the next thing, Andrew? You got the title and the author. What's next? Publisher. What comes after the publisher?
Date.
Date. Which is what date?
The date it was published.
That's right, the copyright. Now, the reason that is that in a book, could a book have 2 dates?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, which means what?
Meaning it was published.
Addition, or addition to it.
Correct. And what's after the date, what else you need? You got title, author, publisher, and date. You need something else.
Where?
Mm-mm. The B word. That's correct. Bibliography. Because bibliography can tell you where he got all of the information to write this sucker.
Well, that's what they used to talk about, Dr. Ben often, because he didn't always do that part.
Well, yeah, he just didn't do it in the conventional way. People usually put footnotes at the bottom of the page or in the back of the book. Dr. Ben would write footnotes in the material that he was writing. He would say, well, I got this from so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so.
So that's why I'm saying, that's why he was accused of teaching feel-good history.
Well, again, that's what they do. But again, the reason they do that is because there's no history I know, none, that is not feel good. All history is about feel good. The issue is just how you tell it. You don't think Oppenheimer ain't about feel good?
Yeah.
For white folk.
You just make a point, you know why there may be some criticism to Doc in that reference. Because Doc and his Black Man Anonymous family mentioned things that go back 10. He tell you, that's like you said, that he's 10 years. Doc tell you, the Africans developed the solar calendar, the solar calendar, 10,000 BC. So this brother, I don't know, and not criticize, this brother's only bringing you to 10,000. Doc can tell you that this thing is going back 10.
Yeah, but if you talk about
50, you have to get it.
right, but I was just going to say, if you talk about the solar calendar, let's say what you say is true, but all of us know that the solar calendar is recently. So we're talking about prior to that, the lunar calendar, and then prior to that, the stellar calendar. So obviously, there were time periods that pre-existed that. The issue is whether they were recording that as written history or whether it was at that time, as we do know, whether it was oral history. Which a great deal of the time period that we're talking about is that there is a period where actual written history comes into existence versus the time period in which we are transmitting this through word of mouth.
It's just like the translation of the earth. You need 29,000 for one cycle. And they worked it out, and somebody worked out 29,000 cycles 3 times at least. No, I was just making that point. The book, I'm pretty sure, is excellent. But there are references to how far back Africans have done things.
Well, most of them, when it comes also down to that, is they're looking at how the calendar was arranged. So let's take the issue about viewing the star Sirius. The object of is to actually see the star in conjunction with the sun. That only takes place every 1,461 years. So what it means is that you can, right now, every year, you're going to go see Sirius in ancient Egypt. You can go see it. But you ain't going to see it in conjunction with no sun. Right. That only happens every 1,461 years. Now, what it meant was that Africans had recorded that they seen it. And then they recorded they seen it again. So obviously, if they seen it just twice, that means that you've seen it for 3,000 years. That's 3,000. In order to know that a procession takes place, you got to at least see it 3 times.
Right. And in the Valley of the Kings, you go into some of the, you see the zodiac.
Mm-hmm.
That is 4,000, 5,000 what they saw to here.
Mm-hmm. That's why I said you, go ahead.
Well, I would say that certainly Dr. Ben deserves all the credit one can imagine. But just remember people like William Leo Handry that did it 30, 40 years before him. He was the Dr. Ben, he was the Dr. Clark of that day.
Right.
But I would say that Dr. Ben's greatest contribution is that he gave us the now at a time when we was looking at Tarzan and as Sister talked about, the white Cleopatras and white Samsons and all that other stuff. A lot of biblical figures and ancient figures.
That's right.
But for him to give us the now at a time where a lot of us felt less than,
That's without a doubt.
was monumental.
But when he gave you the Nile, is there any other river on earth older than what's there?
No, of course not.
Well, I'm just saying, when we say the Nile, we're talking about the blue, the white Nile. We're talking about all those civilizations and its culmination being Kemet, and you know, at its highest peak, so at its zenith. So I would just say that Dr. Ben gave us that better than anybody else.
Right, because we look
Today.
at, we look at that in regard to the beginning in the mouth of the Nile, and then also in relationship. This is what I want everybody to understand. Don't assume that when we talk about the beginning of the Nile, we're talking about the beginning of human beings. That's two different things. Right. And we're talking, wait a minute, hold on, and we're talking about geographically two different areas. This is important. Even though they have relationships. That means relation, as Dr. Lewis talked about the Twa or the Degneshes, those individuals that predated, you know, anything that was going on in ancient Kemet at the time. As a matter of fact, they refer to them as their beginning.
Absolutely.
Right.
The point is, there is no, is there, that's a question, is there another river valley of humanity older than this?
No,
And that's what Doc brought to your attention. This is the oldest. I'm not taking away from anybody else, but it's overriding, regardless of who adds this extra little book here. He told right now to what we got. There may be something old, as he said, but you have to find it and prove it. Right now, he gave you the oldest. So you're standing there now. Somebody come up with something older in China, then you yield to it. But right now, he put to the world this Africans, and what you call African, we're the oldest. We set the stage. Now let somebody disprove it.
without a doubt. All right, I want to thank y'all. It's been a pleasure. I will be back.
Good morning, give us a great big hand.
Let him finish.
Hey, Doctor.
I will be back next week. I mean, week after next, I should say. And I have a little, next time I come, I have a little surprise. We talk about a different subject matter, and it's going to be dealing with the Freedom Riders. But not the Freedom Riders that you familiar with.
You taking this job?
Yes.
We got a freedom thing already.
Go ahead.
Get Dr. Fitch's book from.
I got it from my local bookstore.
Oh, okay.
Why you need you?
Amazon. You can get it right off of Amazon.
The guy said you can get it off of Amazon, so y'all can get it. Thank you, everybody. No, good. What did you say, my man? Thank you. See y'all next week.